Tonight, the Palm Springs Police Department is making adjustments after an officer tested positive for coronavirus. Several other officers who came in contact with him are also being quarantined for 2 weeks. I spoke with Chief Brian Reyes about this and other issues. Chief Reyes, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Peter, thanks for having me once again.
What can you tell us about the Palm Springs police officer who tested positive for coronavirus?
Well, first off, I appreciate you reaching out and inquiring about this specific tough subject, but we knew for a while that the potential was there. We prepared internally with some checks and balances within our station, prepared our staff with equipment and necessary precautions, but given the frequency and the contacts with the public, et cetera, we knew that it was likely inevitable before one of our officers became actually positive. He is quarantined for, as you might imagine, for 14 days. The difficult part is with everything going on in our country and our officers going out there call to call, they also have to consider on a moment's notice that they can test positive for COVID-19, and they got to make an immediate decision on what to do at that point. Do they isolate from the family? Do they leave the home? This specific officer had to leave his family. He has a young child, as you might imagine, would like to run and jump in dad's arms when he gets home, and he doesn't have that option now. He has to isolate for his family for 14 days for doing his job. And that's the most difficult part, I think, that some of our officers are facing, is the fact that they go out and do their job every day, but at any given moment, they may test positive, and they got to make a decision to separate from the family and everybody altogether, for that matter. So tough. I'm sure it's tough mentally.
And I understand this officer became sick during his shift at work. And how is he doing right now?
He's doing good. Struggled initially. It's a day-to-day thing. We're keeping in contact with him, and thanks to technology, we have FaceTime and other means to connect with him, like me and you are connecting now, to have some level of sanity as he can associate with his family and his fellow peers, and know that the police department's there to support him during this tough time.
Do we know how many members of the public he interacted with?
I believe two. Two during one specific shift.
And they've obviously been notified.
Yes, we've notified the appropriate people that he's been in contact with, but it's impacted a number of other employees. We have several others that are off as a precautionary measure, and it in essence, it wiped out an entire shift, a night shift, and they're all being quarantined until they can be cleared to come back to work. And we knew that the potential was there, and we had some contingency plans set in place to fill in should we lose any amount of personnel. But the reality is, no matter how much you plan, you can't sustain should this continue. If we have another officer infected on a different shift and impacts other employees, it's going to be tough to move forward and continue to service the public as they're expected to do.
9 officers were quarantined, correct?
Yes.
So with this other officer who actually did test positive, that's 10.
Yes.
This is going to have a huge impact on the department.
It is. And our officers know that, and they knew that going in months ago. The potential was there. And again, we're lucky that we have plans in place. And if this continues, we're going to find ourselves having to pull officers out of special assignments, out of detective assignments, put them in uniform to suit up, because ultimately the backbone behind any police agency is your patrol force to answer those initial calls for service that the public's calling for help about.
Has the station and patrol cars been thoroughly cleaned and disinfected?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's something that's been in place for a while now. We have in place, just a little background, you can only enter our facility through one of 2 doors. And upon entering, there's masks, there's gloves, there's hand sanitizers, there's a login sheet. You have to check your temperature. You have to log it in. Our staff goes to their individual workplace. You have administration, you have records, you have dispatch, you have detective bureau, you have narcotics. For the most part, we have our staff stay within their work area. So if it's compromised, it limits it to a certain portion of our of our operation here. But as you might imagine, as we experience, you can only do so much, and here we are facing the reality.
Here we are. While I have you here, Chief Reyes, how are things overall at the department right now in light of all of the ongoing protests against police brutality? Is it a tough time to be a cop?
It is very much so, because we understand and have understood for a long time. We have a great community. We have a great relationship. We do a lot of outreach. We partner with all aspects of our community. But now it's very trying. Just what our officers and are facing every single day as it relates to what they see. The hate that's going on throughout our country, not towards just officers, but it's sad to witness how people are treating each other.
And let me ask you, Chief, about this letter that Mayor Protem Christy Holstage recently wrote. She wrote, quote, "Like most communities throughout Riverside County, in Palm Springs and the Coachella Valley, we have a long history of racial segregation and exclusion, racial violence, racist city policies and policing, and injustice and disparities in our community that exist today." What do you think of her words? And have you spoken with her about that?
I have spoken to her. Obviously, as you might imagine, I'm being pulled in so many different directions with everything going on. But ultimately, that's a very broad statement. And I believe she, as well as other council members, have suggested at a council meeting the need for community discussions. So I'm looking forward to, and my staff's looking forward to those community discussions, because I'm sure I'm going to get some very pointed questions regarding history of our police department, and I'm sure she's going to get pointed questions as well as it relates to that specific statement. But it's important. Now more than ever, it's important to get out there and engage our community. There's a lot of pent-up frustration that's built up over the years, and we're witnessing it now, people expressing themselves. We have to be open for that dialogue and that discussion, to dig in the weeds and the roots of the cause and perceptions, whether real or perceived, so we can make appropriate changes as necessary. So again, statement is quite broad. Looking forward to those community discussions where everything comes out so we can discuss.
Are there any examples or concrete evidence of racist policing that you can think of in the Coachella Valley? No,
to be honest, no. And anytime it's brought to our attention, whether real or perceived, we have an obligation to investigate and look into those matters. We do not tolerate that. You just don't. I'm pretty proud about our agency and how we operate as a police department. And again, our long history and our great relationship with the community. You've seen some pretty significant changes in California law enforcement overall as it relates to use of force. A bill passed last year, Assembly Bill 392, I believe, as it relates to use of force, that made it standard across the state of California, coupled with Senate Bill 230, which required all agencies throughout California to have a uniform policy as it relates to use of force that must include de-escalation language in there. So California is very progressive, not only in its policies, law, but also reporting California Department of Justice as it relates to use of force. So again, I really am looking forward to this opportunity to engage with our community, because it gives us an opportunity to learn about what can be improved, but it also gives us a critical opportunity to educate the public of what we have in place already that is applicable to the changes that are being asked to occur.
All right, Chief Reyes, great to talk with you again. Thanks for joining us.
Take care, Peter.